Welcome and good evening to everyone that is joining us for this webinar. I want to send a especially and sisterly greeting to all the women that are today commemorating the International Women's Day. It is a great honor for the Dorothy Day Guild to host a discussion on such an important day, and accompanied by such brave women who are continuing the legacy of the activists that came before us. This cause, however, is not over. I don't want to make you sad, but we talk about commemorating International Women's Day rather than celebrating it, because even today, 133 million girls do not have access to education. 60% of women do not have access to social protection at work. 137 women and girls are killed every day by their partners or family members, which is one every 10 minutes.
Mhm.
And one in five girls worldwide is forced to marry before the age of 18. So, on a day like today, it is necessary to look back at all those women who paved the way that we're traveling today. I was looking this morning through my Instagram, and I was very happy to see Dorothy Day referenced in so many posts, both religious and secular, and her being held as an example of feminist struggle and feminist uh, battle. And although we know that she did not identify herself as a feminist, her very way of acting, of challenging the status quo and recognizing the dignity of everybody without distinction, and all of these illuminated by her faith, positions her as a role model today. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be with all of you amazing women today, and I can't wait to hear what you have to share with us. Rihanna, would you like to introduce our panelists?
Course. Hi. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Rihanna, and I'm an undergraduate student at the University of Notre Dame, where I study psychology and theology. It is honestly a privilege to be here, student hosting this webinar. I was introduced to the Catholic Worker when I was 8 years old, and I was later reintroduced to it through Professor Mulaney's American Radicalism class at Notre Dame. Um, and since then, I've become increasingly interested in the Catholic worker community and the ways it brings together justice and radical care for others. Um, it especially is meaningful to be part of this conversation today, and I'm so honored to help introduce our panelists. So, to start, Sister Helen Prejean is a member of the Congregation of St. Joseph. She is known around the world for her tireless work against the death penalty. She has been instrumental in sparking national dialogue on capital punishment and in shaping the Catholic Church's vigorous opposition to all executions. In 1982, after moving into the St. Thomas Housing Project in New Orleans in order to live and work with the poor, Sister Helen began corresponding with Patrick Sonnier, who had been sentenced to death for murder. She became a spiritual advisor to him and another incarcerated man on death row and accompanied them to their executions. After witnessing these executions, Sister Helen realized that this lethal ritual would remain unchallenged unless its secrecy was stripped away. And so she sat down and wrote a book, Dead Men Walking, an eyewitness account of the death penalty in the United States. Sister Helen also embarked on a speaking tour that continues to this day. Not long after meeting with Sister Helen in August of 2018, Pope Francis announced new language of the Catholicism, which declared that the death penalty is admissible because it is an attack on the inviolability and dignity of the person with no exceptions. Our next panelist brings a powerful witness to faith-based nonviolence and resistance, grounded in both spiritual inheritance and courage action. Claire Grady lives in Ithaca, New York, on Cayuga land in Haudenosaunee territory. She drinks deep from her Catholic Irish roots that have guided her family members into Catholic worker communities and communities of nonviolent resistance. She is grateful for the Plowshares movement and her participation in two plowshare actions, the Griffiths Plowshares in 1983 and the Kings Bay Plowshares in 2018, and many other nonviolent resistance actions. She welcomes opportunities to testify to the faith journey and accompanies these actions. Our next speaker offers a deeply rooted vision of community land, hospitality, and solidarity, and her work speaks to the profound connections between faith, repair, and justice. Brenda Cousin Anglada is a founding member of St. Isidore Catholic Worker Farm in southwest Wisconsin, ancestral homeland of Ho Chunk, Iowa, Sauk, and Muskowee, where her community of six lives by the values of community, spirituality, right relationship with the earth, nonviolent action and decolonization, education, and hospitality. Brenna, who has been a member of the Catholic worker movement for over 25 years, works with religious communities and other white landowners towards the return of the land to indigenous and black communities in the United States as a form of spiritual and material repair. Brenna recently returned from 5 weeks in West Bank, her fifth time in Palestine, providing a protective presence with the international solidarity movement, understanding that the colonization and genocide of Palestinians is intimately connected to the colonization and genocide of indigenous people here on this continent. And finally, we are grateful to welcome a leader whose work helps animate Catholic peacemaking on both national and international levels, while also building relationships across generations of justice seekers. Michelle Sherman is the Director of Programs for Pax Christi USA, the National Catholic Peace Movement, and is involved with Pax Christi International's Global Catholic Nonviolence Initiative. She co-founded the Pax Christi Young Adult Caucus for peacemakers in their 20s and 30s and peace pairs, Pax Christi's annual mutual co-accompaniment program between generations of peacemakers. Michelle is also a retreat presenter and spiritual director and serves on the boards of Bridge Folk and Pace Abini. Thank you so much for being here. We are truly grateful for the chance to learn from each of you today, and I'm excited to begin our conversation.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rihanna. Okay, so before we dive into the conversation, I would like to again to thank the Dorothy Day Guild and the Dorothy Day Center at Manhattan University, our sponsors for our webinar today. And I want to remind you that you are more than welcome, and we ask you to sign up for the Dorothy Day Guild. It is now the membership is completely free. Casey will put the link in the chat, and I will remind you again at the end of our webinar. It is very important for us that you sign up as members. That really help us in the cause for Dorothy's canonization. So I would like to remember you also that our chat will be open through the whole session. So if you have any questions that you would like for the second part of the webinar, please post them in the chat and we will keep track of them. So I would like to start asking all of you, I don't know, feel free to respond in any order you want, about Dorothy, right? What she means to you and the mission that you are all working on today. Maybe Sister Helen could lead
Sure.
us.
I was just reflecting the year I woke up that social justice was integral to the gospel of Jesus is the year that Dorothy died, 1980. And I tell about my journey in River of Fire, about awakening to justice. Um, Sister St. Joseph knew I had to be prayerful. I wanted to be prayerful, steeped in the prayer of the church. But I didn't know about justice. Charity, yeah, I was a teacher. I was kind to my kids, enjoyed the kids I taught. But I was living in the suburbs, and I'm in a city, New Orleans, where fully half of the city is struggling African American people. And I grew up in privilege. Um, Found out you can be pious, but if you're grown up in privilege, it doesn't mean you're connected. And so the waking up to Dorothy was the waking up to justice. I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, y'all, during the Jim Crow days. So I'm going to be 87 in April. So in the 40s and 50s, we lived in the big house. Daddy was a successful lawyer. And Ellen, a black African American couple, Ellen worked in the house with Mama. Jesse worked in the yard. They lived literally in this little house called the servants' quarters in the back of our big house and never questioned the Jim Crow laws. And culture, see, gives us eyes and gives us ears. And Mom and Daddy were kind. And Daddy actually helped Ellen and Jesse buy a house, helped him get a good job. Charity, kindness, but not questioning the system. So that's why I still feel that my waking up was grace that woke me up. And there were steps in the journey. And then one of them was where our sisters went to a conference, and this great woman, Maria Augusta Neal, a sister of Notre Dame de Namur, who taught at Boston at Emmanuel College for 40 blooming years. She taught sociology and the gospel, the New Testament. So she's grounded, and I needed to be grounded. The saying about me in the community was I'd have all these ideas about how we needed to win the world for Christ. And they go, there goes Helen again with her dreams, her feet firmly planted in midair. So the waking up happened because I heard Maria Augusta Neal. And I'll give you the line. I mean, the way God wakes us up was Jesus preached good news to the poor. And I thought I knew what was coming next about how they were suffering now, but one day they'd have a great reward in heaven. And she said, integral to good news for poor people is they have a right to struggle. This isn't God's will. This is a human system. And they have a right to struggle against it. And our place is to be in solidarity with them. And I thought, I don't even know any poor people. And that's what led me to leave the suburbs, move into this inner city. And that's where the grace was waiting, because for the first time in my life, I lived among African American people. Before then, they had always been my servants. I lived among them as my peers. And it was while I was in that soil, one day coming out of our adult learning center, I got an invitation. Hey, Sister Helen, you want to be a pen pal to somebody on death row? And I thought, I'm an English major. I could write letters. I never dreamed they were going to execute this person. I think Jesus is sneaky. You got to watch Sneaky Jesus. Because I think I'm just going to be writing letters, right? And I do. But the guy writes back. And so there's a relationship. And so then I visit him. And his execution, early in the early morning hours of April 5th, 1984, watching that protocol of death, seeing that violence and his inherent dignity as a human being, and the grace had just said, Pat, when they do this, look at me, I'll be there. Look at me, I'll be the face of Christ for you. And I had the grace to do it and came out, and my life was changed. So then, in those days, living at St. Thomas at Hope House, that's when I turned to the lives of the saints because I was ready for them. That's when I read Dorothy Day. That's when I read Martin Luther King. That's when I read about Gandhi and nonviolence. So Dorothy was always for me because she, first of all, was a journalist. I wanted to write. I wanted to do some kind of newspaper for justice, for the writing, for the being involved in justice, and her nonviolence. I mean, she was brave in her nonviolence with the Second World War going on, and she still stood up for nonviolence, you know. And to witness that legalized protocol of violence of the state, and then the claim to victims' families that this is going to heal you, will save you a spot on the front row, and you get to watch as we kill the one who killed your loved one. You get to watch that, and that's what's going to heal you. So I got set on fire because I witnessed it. I got close to it. And I know what my mission is. It's to bring people close. They're removed from it. They don't see it. And that saying from one of the Cardinal brothers in Nicaragua, what the eye doesn't see, the heart can't feel. So I know what my job is to bring people close. And that's why I wrote the book and why I give talks. When I give talks, I take people with me on my own journey and bring them close from being unawake and then the whole thing of through grace waking up.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sister.
Yeah.
Claire, would you like to continue?
Yes, thank you, Magdalena. And thank you, Sister Helen. That was beautiful testimonial. So what does Dorothy mean to me now? Well, my parents were inspired by Dorothy and Peter, and so I just kind of imbibed. But it was Thomas Merton and Dan and Phil Berrigan, and
Mm.
but I think I didn't read my first book about Dorothy until I had kids and I was in a jail here in Syracuse, New York, and somebody had put the book in the library or on the bookshelf. And I was like, well, would you look at that? I didn't know this and this about Dorothy. But I was, when I said yes to be on this panel, I was like, ooh. And someone said, follow in the footsteps of Dorothy. I was like, I don't think so. But I definitely have been accompanied by Catholic workers my whole life, it seems like, my whole adult life. Um, and the hospitality that has been provided, not just in the houses, but in the spaces and in the work of resistance, seems like I'm always in the presence of or accompanied by Catholic workers. But I want to acknowledge how the cause for her Dorothy's sainthood has sort of additionally legitimized the work of justice within Catholic circles. So I go to my parish church for 33 years, and um, it's kind of an agonizing experience, actually. I have chosen to go to the church downtown where I live, where I walk, and where I pushed my babies to go to Mass. My mother said, take your babies to church, Claire, they'll soak in everything. And I basically spent about 15 or so years just being nice and saying thank you. And then I realized I was practicing a sin of omission by not speaking out more. And but anyway, Dorothy appeared in one of the books that we were reading in a women's study group, an Endow women's study group. That was the book that kind of horrified me, actually. But there was a chapter on Dorothy, so it was really interesting to have some kind of reference point for my dear sisters who maybe are steeped in Christian nationalism, and to have some kind of like stepping stone that said, yeah, Dorothy Day, like she's not just me or her, but she's like somebody. So there's that interesting the value of having someone like that. Um, and I guess yeah, I've appreciated hearing. I did meet Dorothy. I worked with United Farm Workers when I was a teenager and when I left high school. And I was sitting at a table at the New York City Boycott House on 84th Street on the west side of Manhattan. And Dorothy came to see Cesar when he was in one of his visits. So we were at the same table, but we didn't have a conversation. I was just in the presence of, and been grateful to become friends with and co-defendants with Martha Hennessy, her granddaughter, and to get to know Dorothy a lot more. Perhaps that's enough out of me. I really love what you said, Sister Helen. just put the justice back in the gospel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. It is, yeah, such an important. Sometimes we forget about how clear the gospel is about justice, and we get lost in many other rules or more superficial stuff, I would say. But the gospel is very clear, even from the Old Testament, actually, how important is justice and that our God is a God of justice. And we are commanded to bring that justice to the world. Brenna, would you like to continue?
Sure. Thank you. I just want to say what an honor it is to be on a panel with such incredible women. So thanks for having me. And to see all the participants. I see a lot of people I recognize. So Dorothy, yeah, she has had a profound impact on my life. I have been a member of the Catholic Worker Movement since I was probably about 19, and I'm 47 now, so over 25 years for sure. And it is she has the movement she founded along with Peter has shaped my entire adult life. And I'm like forever grateful because I love this movement. I grew up Catholic and I loved being Catholic. And then in college, I started learning more about the injustices in the world and um, started learning more about like what war really is and had it, I had paid attention to the gospels growing up, and I saw a lot of incongruency between the US foreign policy and what I had been hearing in the gospels and war and what I had been hearing in the gospels and all sorts of things and what I had been hearing in the gospels. And I don't know if I honestly, I don't know if I would have stayed Catholic if I hadn't found the Catholic Worker Movement. I met Claire and Scott Schaefer Duffy in college. And when I heard them describe, I was a math major. And when I heard them describe the Catholic Worker and I went and visited their house of hospitality, I just knew in my gut and in my soul, like, this is who I'm meant to be. And it was so exciting. It's like, I want to join this movement. And the movement brings together just so many beautiful things that I love, even like today, still being a part of, like hospitality for anybody, and definitely focusing on the poor. And then I live at a Catholic Worker farm where we provide some hospitality, and our focus is more on care for creation, daily prayer together, education, and like journalism and writing, and nonviolence. I think Dorothy provided a model. So it was Dorothy, but then also everybody in the movement. I am so grateful to be a part of a movement that has like Claire Grady as a model. We have like elders, and now some people are saying that I'm becoming an elder also, but elders in the movement that like people who are part of my extended family who I can look up to, who can say, well, this is how I went to prison, and you can do it too, and let's do it together. Or this is how I've been caring. There was just a colleague of mine, Sarah, from the Lake City Catholic Worker Farm. I think she might be on here, at least Paul is, who had just talked about the various forms of hospitality they've been doing on their Catholic Worker Farm and hospicing people through their deaths. And then there's like Brian and Betsy at the Malloy Catholic Worker Farm in Iowa, who host a craft gathering every year and like balance, trips to Afghanistan and the Middle East and the Nevada Desert Peace Walk with weaving rugs on a loom handmade. So there's just like such a wealth and breadth and depth to this movement that I get to be a part of and get to be influenced by and get to share my life with, and not to mention like getting to travel anywhere in the country and being welcomed, like never have to pay for a motel because I can always just go to my Catholic Worker friends. So yeah, Dorothy has founded a movement that has shaped my entire life, and I'm forever grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brenna. And finally, Michelle.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for inviting me into this circle. Um, it's really been a gift to reflect on Dorothy um, at this particular time uh, in my own life. The beginning of March has several sort of life um, anniversaries for me, and so between the 1st of March and today was my anniversary of baptism as a Catholic, my anniversary of becoming a US citizen, and also today commemorating International Women's Day. And for me, Dorothy sort of has been a guiding um, accompanier, even though I never had an opportunity to meet her. But for me, she sort of encapsulates all of these questions and identities. So what does it mean to be a Catholic? What does it mean to be a US citizen or someone living in the US, and the responsibility of commitment to peace? And what does it mean to be a woman in the church? And so I will say that the first time I met Dorothy was in high school when I'm also the product of 8 years of all women education with the Sisters of the Precious Blood at high school and Sisters of the Holy Cross in college. And so our religious studies classes were filled with women who made a difference and who lived um, that call of peacemaking. And so the first time I met her was through the Entertaining Angels video and film. And I know that that's one aspect of her life. So it doesn't tell the whole story. But then it was in my early 20s when I read The Long Loneliness that really made an impact. And I think too for young adults today, what she says about during our modern time, we have an epidemic of loneliness and isolation because we've forgotten that we belong to each other. And that long loneliness, well, the only remedy for it is love, and love realized through community. And um, so that made a profound impact on my life, reading The Long Loneliness. For me, she is someone who um, can bridge so much of the polarization that we see in the church. She was so consistent in all of her issues that Sister Helen, Claire, and Brenna already mentioned: peace, economic injustice, nonviolence, labor, United Farm Workers, deeply committed to all of these areas of Catholic social teaching, and deeply drawing from the practices, the rituals of that are expressed in the Catholic faith. And so I think for many people today, she can bridge those sort of polarizations that we see.
Hmm.
Thank you, Michelle.
Hmm.
What a nice reflection. I feel that also what draws me to Dorothy's seeing all her work, all the stuff that she wrote, but also all the stuff that she did. When you study theology, you usually learn a lot of Catholic social teaching and moral and all that stuff, but from people that not necessarily are living it. And when uh, you get to read and to understand it from a person that actually made her life a testimony of what the church and what the gospel finally is asking to all of us, is such a wonderful thing. It kind of connects, like this is actually possible. Like I can actually at least try to live all this stuff that I also believe, you know?
Yeah.
Well, thank you, all of you, for your reflections, and I would like to do some like individual questions, maybe if we go in the same order, and starting with Sister Helen. I don't want to. I would like to keep women at the center because that's what we are commemorating today, and I understand that you have not accompanied any woman, any sentenced woman, but I understand that you have accompanied many women that are also victims of death penalty because they are families and they are the partners or maybe mothers and daughters, and they are related in so many different ways to the people that you have accompanied to the death row. So I would like to ask you how that experience has been for you. What is more distinctive of the woman related to these cases, and what have you learned from this experience?
Yeah. Well, I am directly connected uh, to a woman in California on death row. In fact, we're trying to see what we can do to get her out. It's like when these bars come down in these
Mhm.
legalities, like did she have a prior? And she had a prior with drugs. And so she's in California. California has a governor that's done decent stuff, shut down the killing chamber, moved people off of death row. But but I've known this woman for 15, 20 years, talking to her on the phone and her sister, and
Oh,
trying to
sorry.
get
So
her.
let me interrupt you. Then I would like to ask you because I was not aware of this. What are her main concerns, or is it she lives this in a different way? Are there different affections being involved? What are
Most of
her
the
main
women,
concerns?
yeah, women for the most part, she's typical. She was abused as a child. She did a lot of drugs to temper the pain, got involved in crimes, got involved with a serious crime, a murder, and she's in prison. Um, Women are just sensitive. Uh, the struggles, like she's in a dorm, and one of the women in the dorm made her cry because she felt she was being mean to her. It's just so many things, just like we would go through if you can't choose your roommates and you're in a close space with people. But she has great courage and great faith. But women, I don't know. It's just, I think the women in prison, just the way they're treated in prison, first of all, that it's men's clothes for the most part, and it's just such a male and harsh environment. So one of the things that's just happened with her is because of Gavin Newsom's reforms, she got to take classes. Um, so she was brought off a death row, which meant the first thing was they took her handcuffs off. And the big thing it meant was that she was now could be in a part of the prison where when she went from one part of the prison to the next, she was not strip searched. So it meant when she was on death row, you strip searched all the time. How do you maintain your dignity with that? And then it kind of invites not always the best side of your fellow inmates that are with you, that they can be mean and you can, it's just a really tough thing. How we can get her out, it's going to take an act of God, but we're trying to see what kind of way through clemency or something, and I'll do anything, uh, appeal to anybody, like the Vatican, Pope, anybody to try to help her. So I don't know if I answered your question or not.
And thank you. Yeah, uh, definitely. It's what you share is very interesting and touching because we usually see how men are or have more details or more experience of how what men go through,
Yeah,
but not what women go through.
yeah,
Um, do you have oh, and what about your experience accompanying the families of men?
yeah,
Like,
yeah. The mothers, oh my God, the suffering of the saddest funerals in the world have been the funerals of people executed. The mothers trying to protect the mothers from the press, trying to just get a photograph of them at the funeral of their child. Um, it's There's just a great, great need for people, the victims' families. I mean, one of the approaches I think we got to take to end the death penalty is look at all the millions we're spending to kill one person. The average wait from the time a person's sentenced to death to the time of execution is 17 years. So even if you're claiming you're doing this for the victim's family, their grief is public. They don't have a private place to grieve. And they wait 17 years on average. And then are put in a seat in the front row and told to watch as the state kills the person who killed their loved one. And that's supposed to heal them. What if we put all those resources into life, helping at-risk kids, just helping families heal that have been the subjects of violence? There's just so much that we can do there. I'm going to tell you the hope, though. I got to tell you this, that in all my travels and talking to people, I've found that most American people have good hearts. And what did Dorothy used to say? We have to build a society where it's easier for people to be good. We have to build the new in the shell of the old. And Americans do have good hearts, I've found. And that when they are brought close to this thing, they go, oh, well, I didn't know it was like that. And we can have change. Just to give you a little example, when Dead Man Walking came out in 93, 80% of the American public said they supported the death penalty. But that is not reflected. And now it's closer to 50%. And then when they're actually given the question of life versus death, over 60%. And juries don't hand out death sentences. People don't want to kill people. But it's the power of the gospel is always persuasive. And it's always like, let me take you close here, take a look at this, then see how you feel. And I had a really good editor that helped me shape the story in Dead Man Walking, or you never would have heard of the book, because they just helped me. You got to take that reader into the journey with you, and you got to bring them first into the crime and feel the outrage and the suffering. And then your job is to walk this tightrope and bring them into that execution chamber, even when the person is guilty, that people are worth more than the worst thing they've ever done. This is what the gospel means, of that inviolable dignity. And this is the dialogue that I got into with the hierarchy and with the Pope, Pope John Paul, later with Pope Francis, about why, see, the church in its teaching was stuck. It kept upholding the right of the state to take life. And as long as you had that, you're going to have, then in other words, you set up the system, you decide who's worth killing, all that. And that's what had to change. So that was 1,500 years of dialogue. And Dorothy would really approve of that, because dialogue, as Pope Leo is saying every other breath out of his mouth, dialogue is the answer, because we help bring people into encounter with other people and see suffering and empathy. And so it finally changed in 2018, but it was a departure from Augustine in the 5th century, saying the violent could be coerced with the sword. So that's all that dialogue. And of course, history happening when we didn't have prisons and you didn't have a way to keep people safe, and all that goes on into it. But dialogue and sharing our experiences. And I think that's the gift of the Catholic worker. And Dorothy, look at us. We're just ordinary people that the gospel woke up and we're doing, and then we connect with each other. And it's a beautiful thing. And it makes us know that we're alive and we're in there.
Thank you, sister. Claire, I would like to ask you, sometimes the anti-nuclear activism is seen as something that it is like so far, or that doesn't affect all of us. I come from Chile. We don't have we don't have death penalty. We don't have anti-nuclear activism. Thank God, both things are already kind of solved for us. But I would like to know, in solidarity to all of the women, how do nuclear weapons and testings affect women, and what challenges they face in the affected communities, and what has been your experience including the women affected in these communities in your movement and demonstrations.
Thank you, Magdalena, and thank you, Sister Helen. I just love listening to you. Um, I um, I want to lift up the work of a woman named Sister Rosalie Bertel. She wrote a book called No Immediate Danger, and she was a gray nun who maybe was a statistician. She studied the effects of low-level radiation, and it was her conclusion that everybody is affected by radiation. It's not just people living next to a nuclear plant or a test site. Definitely, that is even more exposure. But she claims that there's millions who have been lost their lives because of the radioactivity that has been released from nuclear weapons themselves, and the testing and the refining and the nuclear power plants. So I would say everyone's affected, but certainly as women, um, we carry the next generations, right? And that makes those are the most affected. Every little embryo that's multiplying its cells so quickly um, is highly sensitive to radioactivity. Um, when we so radioactivity is only one of the pieces about nuclear weapons that concerned me, and I will speak a little bit more about that. All the mining, refining, and testing of nuclear weapons on Turtle Island happens on indigenous land.
Mm.
And so, this is, of course, not surprising, right, in this colonial project, and that they would be on the front line of the colonial weapon, deadliest weapons. Um, so we have relationship with women who have been organizing in their communities. Leona Morgan, who is Dene, and she works now with nuclear study issue, and anyway, she just changed organizations, but she works in her community to stop the mining and the refining. And then where I live in Haudenosaunee territory, on the western door of Haudenosaunee territory, is the Seneca people, and I'm grateful to know two Seneca women, Agnes Williams and Maria Maybe, who have been working to clean up West Valley, the nuclear storage place that was put in by our federal government back in the 60s, I believe. And this place is just leaking with radioactivity on the Cattaraugus River. And so the women in the people, Seneca people, have high rates of cancer.
Mm.
And but they do an annual walk, Earth Walk, and Agnes started the Indigenous Women's Initiative, and there's this beautiful network of Indigenous women. And I will say that one of my, I want to say, mentors really is a woman, a Buddhist nun named Junsan. She is part of the community of nuns and monks that chant Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, and the founder, Nippon Hoji, was good friends with Gandhi. But anyway, they have these instructions. Wherever they go, they are asked to make their first relationships with the First Nation people. So when June-san came to Turtle Island in the late 70s, she went right to Alcatraz and became very close with Dennis Banks and the guys, all the people from American Indian Movement, and was part of the longest walk one and subsequent walks. And she's walked around the earth probably, but certainly Turtle Island many times. But she makes it a point for those of us anti-nuclear activists. Like, I don't even call myself an activist, actually. I didn't really know that word until I came to live up in Ithaca. I was like, what are you talking about? But because I kind of related to the word organizer a little bit more. Um, but Jun-san insists on introducing her friends to the indigenous people where we live, and bringing up, the doctrine of discovery, um, and the schools, the residential schools and things. Anyway, it's just such a beautiful, yeah, very beautiful organizer, I want to call her, and spiritual guide. Um, so yes, we're all affected by radioactivity, and we are all, but indigenous people are on the front line of that.
Mhm.
Um, and so I don't try to bring them into my activity, but I try to support their work and uplift their voices. Um, but I will say then, with my choices to do nonviolent symbolic disarmament, it isn't so much, it's not, I wouldn't call it a demonstration, for instance. I would call it a manifestation. So that you're not trying to get somebody else to do something,
Mm.
you're doing something yourself.
Mm.
And it's really a sacramental act. When you go to a nuclear weapons site and you clip the lock and you step over the line and you bring a few ounces of your blood and you bring a household hammer that has the words from Isaiah, and you bring an indictment that says clearly that these weapons of mass destruction are the big crime. Um, you change your relationship to the weapon, and you change your relationship to the systems that those weapons enforce.
Mm. Wow.
That was something, like, I'm not a college person or university academic so much, but it was on a spiritual level that I understood with my first Plowshares Action. I didn't know it beforehand, but in the middle of it, or after undertaking it, I realized, and I can't use two hands because I'm holding this little iPhone here, but it was like a chiropractic alignment, that my relationships to
Oh,
the weapon, the wicked systems that they enforce, and my creator and creation changed
wow.
at action.
Wow.
So when I took that Plowshares Action in the 80s with the Griffiths Plowshares Action, I was freshly out of, well, I had been in high school. We just learned about Hiroshima and Nagasaki really for the first time in the 70s. They released the film and released all the details about radioactivity that was released in that bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Um, so my heart knew that this would be like the end of creation as we knew it. And so I went forward with that in my heart, but also it wasn't actually until I went to the trial that my sister and brother, my sister Ellen and my brother John were in the Plowshares #4, that I realized the role of the courts was to defend, protect the weapons. And that's when I realized, oh, I'm now, I've seen too much. I can't unsee and unhear. I have to act now. And so I went with my co-defendants, Liz McAllister, Jackie Allen, Kathleen Rumpf, Fern Rossman, Dean Hammer, Carl Smith. We went to Griffiths Air Force Base where they had the cruise missile, first strike nuclear weapon. But the second time I did a Plowshares was in Kings Bay, Georgia, in St. Mary's, Georgia, Kings Bay Naval Base, where they have the Trident submarine deployed. It's home port to at least 6, and just one of those Tridents can kill 200 million to a billion people, or anyway, it's like changed the world. Um, but I understood it differently as a woman in my 60s, that these weapons are not just deadly if they're used, if they're launched, but I really appreciated Daniel Ellsberg image of how these weapons are used every day, just like a cocked gun. If you hold a gun to someone's head, even if you never pull the trigger, you are using that gun.
Mm.
That's how those weapons are used. And that's what we can see right now. We are the number one bully on the planet.
Mm.
The number one bully. We are the number one gangster, is how I call it. But even more than so, just trying to tell the world what I think, my spiritual awakening and personal transformation, that is a faith-based transformation, was seeing the relationship. Now, I've heard people say this now, relationships changed. And I realized, to the extent that those of us privileged by these systems that these weapons enforce, to the extent that those of us privileged in these systems take responsibility for the big crimes of killing millions, because that's what we're doing right now, and stealing trillions, we will stop scapegoating everyone on the receiving end of these crimes.
Mm.
All the women I've ever been in prison and jails with are living the legacy of the big crimes of genocide, enslavement, and capitalism. So that is an internal spiritual adjustment. No one becomes my project then. I'm not here to just help you get, like, I'm in prison for one thing, to learn, to learn and to experience what it's like to be treated less than human. And I have had the particular distinction of being labeled as part of a terrorist organization. So that was in
You're
the
really
80s.
right.
That was in the 80s. And then I didn't realize that I still had that designation on my file in '06 when I went into prison for the St. Patrick's 4 symbolic action. And that explained, my caseworker called me in and said, I don't think you really, it doesn't seem like you're part of a terrorist organization. But one of my sisters, Teresa, went to live in Kings Bay, Georgia, in Brunswick, Georgia, to continue organizing and connecting what we were very, or I was very concerned, uh, very intentional about linking the triplets, talking about the triplets of racism, which is white supremacy, and militarism and economies of greed. And so she lived there and did more organizing and got to know Ahmaud Arbery's family. He was killed a few years after our action, 2 years after our action. Um, but in any case, she made friends with a woman there who worked with Homeland Security, and the woman that worked for Homeland Security had to get all her friends cleared. And so she submitted Teresa Grady's name, and it came back that she could be friends with Teresa, but she was told you can't be friends with her sister, to Claire.
Mm.
So these kind of things in this day and age, just this word solidarity is very significant. It's like my body and my heart and my soul and my children and my is just a little bit closer because I live in this white skin and so much privilege that I don't have to have had that experience or that live in this geography right now. But that's what nuclear nonviolent symbolic disarmament has meant for me. And
Thank you.
thank you. And so it brings me into community and different, I would say, better relationship with my sisters that are in prison. And then when I come out, that's part of what the organizing that I do today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire. Um, we are continuing now with Brenna. I would like to ask you about your experience in the West Bank. I know that you were there as a protective presence, and even though I know that you were with everybody that was victim of this genocide carried by Israel and sponsored by the US. I would like to ask you if you have any particular experience about uh, what women are suffering, what especially women suffer in war, in a genocide like this, how the gender roles maybe change or maybe remain the same in this time of crisis. What was your perception and experience during this trip?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, so I got to travel with the International Solidarity Movement through Meta Peace Team to the West Bank last fall for 5 weeks. It was not my first time. My first time was actually with other Catholic workers in 2004 to the West Bank. And I returned again several times in the 2000s. But it had been a long time since I had been there. I think the last time I was there, it was 2009. And then I returned again last fall. And part of actually my transition to living on a Catholic worker farm was due to the life that I witnessed and got to experience when being with Palestinians back in 2004, 6, 7, 9. I saw communities, families, men, women, children who so identified with the land that they loved, like they were the land was them, and as someone that they were willing to defend it as communities and willing to like organize and resist at great cost to themselves in order to remain on their land and protect their land. And I had never experienced like a love for place like that. So the last time I returned, I moved from a Catholic Worker House of Hospitality to Catholic Worker Farms and have been rooted on land ever since, in large part because I was inspired by my time in Palestine. Um, it's hard to speak specifically of gender dynamics because I don't think I've spent enough time in the West Bank to know the intricacies. What I will say is, at least as an outsider looking in, and for the little snippets that I've caught, resistance to the occupation and ethnic cleansing, which Palestinians have been resisting, the the settlement and colonization of their land since before 1948, since before Israel became a state, since it was first talked about in the late 1800s, and definitely since 1948, in like various and incredible and creative ways. Um, I saw what I see of Palestinians is like they take education really seriously, and men, both girls and boys, are educated. One of the things we did was accompany children or monitor checkpoints to make sure children were able to get through to school. And we're counting boys and girls and male teachers and female teachers who are being daily harassed in order to get to and from school. They have to go through these huge, monstrous, disastrous checkpoints monitored by Israeli soldiers. This is like every day, several times a day on a every single day basis. And then we report those numbers to the UN so they can see whether the occupation is impacting Palestinians' ability to be educated. Palestinians are the most highly educated population on earth. Gaza has the highest literacy rate on earth, and that spreads between boys and girls, men and women. So again, from the outside looking in, the gender equality seems there to me, but I can't speak totally eloquently. But how the occupation is impacting women, I can share like one of the women I met who lives in the city of Hebron, or as Palestinians call it, Al Khalil. There's an Israeli settlement right in the heart of this Palestinian city. And that is why Palestinians who live inside this restricted area are forced to walk through these checkpoints just to get to school or work, or go grocery shopping. And they're not allowed to drive cars in their own neighborhood, even though it's their own neighborhood, because this monstrosity has been built up around them. And there's a woman there whom we met. I'm not going to name her because of security purposes, but she's an artist, and a resistor to the occupation. And she's lived in her house in this restricted area. Again, it's a Palestinian city, but it has been an Israeli settlement, has illegally been built right in the heart of the city, and some Palestinians have been, for lack of a better word, like trapped inside, only allowed in and out at the whim of Israeli soldiers. And this woman's lived there for decades and raised her 3 children there. Her husband was a huge leader in the nonviolent resistance against the occupation. He was a member of the International Solidarity Movement, which is a Palestinian-led movement calling for internationals to stand with them as they nonviolently resist. And her husband was killed by the Israeli military 15 years ago by excessive tear gas. The soldiers filled the house with tear gas so much that he died from it. And since then, she's received many threats, death threats. She's received offers of large sums of money to leave. Like again and again, I heard from Palestinians, men, women, and children. They would say, like, I would ask, why do you think they're doing this? And to a person, they would say, Israelis want to make it so awful for us here that we choose to leave. They want to make our lives so difficult for us that we choose to leave. So people like this woman are like, they're like, we're not leaving. You can offer me as much money as you want and threaten me, and we are not leaving. And I might have to wait at a checkpoint for an hour every day, both in and out. And you might harass me and make my life hell. And I'm not leaving because this is who I am. This is my home. This is my land, and I'm staying. And she's an incredible artist, and she welcomes internationals into her home to tell her story. And there's countless women like this. They can't all be as open because it's really dangerous to be a resistor in Palestine right now. Israelis have instituted a law in the West Bank. It's called administrative detention. So if you're Palestinian, you are subject to be picked up and kidnapped by soldiers whenever they feel like it, and thrown in jail for 6 months under this new law called administrative detention. And you don't have to, without charge. So Palestinians are just being thrown in prison constantly and consistently for 6 months at a time, where they're experiencing lots of physical and sexual abuse, both men and women alike. So it's pretty dangerous to be public about your resistance. But like every Palestinian I met, they're resisting with what they call sumud, or their word in Arabic is sumud. It means steadfastness. So like this woman I was telling you about, she's steadfast. Her resistance isn't like, she's not going to demonstrations or going out there and making her voice loudly heard, but she is not leaving. And that's how she's being steadfast and living her life. We were out, Palestinians are harvesting their olives. It's just like for many of them, it's their livelihood. So every fall they go out and harvest olives and make olive oil. And it's like a family event. Again, men, women, children, grandmothers, aunties, uncles, everybody. And the women are incredibly involved in, it's a very land-based, beautiful activity. And more, and you may have read in the last fall, it's always been difficult. Like soldiers and settlers have made it very difficult for Palestinians to access their own olive groves to harvest. But last fall, October of 2025, was the highest amount of violence against Palestinians on record ever. Like 2,500 attacks between the army in 1 month, between the army and settlers. And settlers have become emboldened. They've been armed by Israel, by the security minister, Ben-Gvir. He handed out over 100,000 automatic weapons, and settlers are using them. They're just coming out. I was with a group of, there were 60 of us solidarity activists who are, again, both male and female, and lots who don't identify as either or both, genderqueer folks who are out standing in solidarity. We're no longer referring to it as a protective presence, because in the last few months, it's very clear that you can't call it protective presence anymore. It's solidarity presence. We're just there to harvest our olives in solidarity with Palestinians. And yeah, the soldiers tried to stop us using tear gas and sound bombs, and then we were ambushed by like several dozen masked settlers who just opened live fire with automatic weapons on all 150 of us who were out there, Palestinians and solidarity activists alike. Um, so yeah, it's pretty intense for everybody. And so I don't know how well I can speak how women are being impacted in a particular way. We did get to meet one woman, Alia, who had the last few days of my time there, we visited her. She was living in a village outside of Hebron, and soldiers had invaded her village and just outright murdered her 9-year-old son. They took aim and sniped him as he was playing soccer. It was all caught on video, and he died. So some of us got to be with her in her grief, which we were pretty shocked by, that she would even allow strangers in her home with her. But she was very clear that we had a responsibility to share her son Mohammed's story. He was killed in October of 25, a 9-year-old boy, in the village of Al Rahia while he was playing soccer. And this mother, was in deep grief, and asked us to share her story. So yeah, everybody's resisting. It's incredible to see the steadfastness of all Palestinians, and women for sure are a huge part of that. So thanks for letting me share. And if anyone wants to learn about how to go be a solidarity presence with Palestinians, like I would be really happy for you to be in contact with me.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Brenna, so much for sharing this powerful testimony. Finally, Michelle, it's not my intention to put you on the spot, but I had to make this question. You are working with Pax Christi. It is an institution that is born from the Catholic Church, and the intention is to work for peace with justice. So I would like to ask you how it is your experience and how you balance working for peace from an institution that historically has not been precisely just and fair with women. And if you feel or you can see in the future Pax Christi taking the gender inequality or gender injustice as they have embraced other subjects as racial justice or nonviolence.
Thank you so much, Magdalena, for these questions. I want to share a piece of art because I have in my office lots of art around, and this is one that continues to be inspirational to me. Usually I have it up on here, but I took it off. So it's by another Sister Helen David Brancato, who is an artist outside of Philadelphia. And she and I became friends, and she does a lot of peace and justice artwork. She's done several pieces of art for Pax Christi. But this one says, "It was the women who stayed." And it has the women under Mary underneath Jesus, and then all around it are prophetic women, all the women who stayed: Clare of Assisi, Hildegard, Julian of Norwich, Dorothy Day, the four church women of El Salvador, Sojourner Truth, Kateri Tekakwitha, and it goes around. And the reason why I share this today, I think, is because, well, your question, as I read it, and my eyes just immediately went up to this corner in my office, and I said, it's true that it was the women who stayed, and I think that is part of how I see my work within Pax Christi, within the church, reminding people that women have always been part of the Jesus movement. From even the gospel today, right, was all about the Samaritan woman. And here was a woman who was on the margins of her community who brought her community to back to the well to experience Jesus. And and then also preparing for this webinar, what I went back to one of my favorite quotes of Dorothy's, and is when she's talking about the seeds of regeneration that are within the church. And so she said that regardless of how corrupt the institution becomes, the church carries within it the seeds of its own renewal. And so many times within church history, it has been the women who have been that seed of renewal, whether it was Dorothy or people like Marie Dortel Cloto, who was one of the founders of Pax Christi International, which she founded to bring reconciliation between French and German Catholics after World War II. Whether it's people like Eileen Egan and Dorothy Day, who were founders of Pax Christi, and in part of those initial conversation of how do we start a Catholic peace movement in the United States, to founders of religious communities who started their religious communities to meet a very concrete need, right? Mother Cabrini with accompaniment service to immigrant communities, Mother Mary Lang, um, Catherine of Siena, like all of these prophetic women are part of our tradition, and so that big I think that is one of the main reflections that I bring back to that question is that constantly reminding chur- people in the church and outside of the church that women have always been the ones who have stayed. Um, I also think about our current context. Martha Inez Romero, who is the head of Pax Christi International, people who have founded intentional communities. Marie Dennis in a CC community in Washington, D.C., the many Catholic workers who are on this call, founding those intentional communities, and not only founding them, but doing that with intention, with creativity, with solidarity, subsidiarity, and creativity, and incorporating the arts. And also, as Claire mentioned, the close tie of women-led movements of indigenous communities and care for integral ecology. So I think about how Pax Christi as a movement it's not an institution, and it kind of operates in this sort of liminal space in that we are part of the church and we have a bishop president, but then because it's a movement, it's led by the people. And so in some ways we operate in a way that's more porous, that is not necessarily tied to the hierarchy, and yet calls the hierarchy through the Catholic Nonviolence Initiative to reclaim its commitment to gospel nonviolence. And then I was also thinking of I'll share to the second half of your question, Magdalena, about women, and I was also thinking about militarism in general and how militarism is an expression of patriarchy. And so I have a quote here from the International Women's Network Against Militarism. And it says, "We define militarism as a system of beliefs, political priorities, and economic investments. Militarism includes the activities of corporations that produce and sell weapons, the role of state militaries, including state-sanctioned violence, martial law, repression, extrajudicial killing, military coups, military dominance within governments. Militarism is shored up by patriarchy and reinforces violent masculinity. Military sexual violence is a manifestation of the synergy between militarism and patriarchy. Genuine security requires the following guarantees: that the environment can sustain life, that people's basic needs are met, that human dignity is respected, people's sovereignty is assured, and society is organized so as to prevent avoidable harms. And I really see that as like, who wouldn't want that, right? Who wants our tax dollars to go towards all the things that Claire was talking about with the funding towards nuclear arms when it could go for basic human needs, education, food, like basic things, bread, not stones, right? Um, and so I think that the work of Pax Christi in um, in addressing militarism, anti-racism, economic justice, it indirectly and directly addresses the militarism as an expression of patriarchy. And again, so many times it is the women who are leading um, those pieces, and not just military, but also one of Pax Christi International's campaigns right now is on extractive mining. And I think of Sister Maudelia Lopez in Guatemala, who brought a case against uh, a Canadian mining company and won because she said it is tearing our community apart. It is bringing ecological devastation. An indigenous woman herself, and it's just it's incredible the amount of women's stories who are not that are not amplified and shared. So um, I think I'm sorry, I could go on for a while, but I think I will leave it at that and just call us back to it was the women who stayed. So to stay and continue to show up myself, even though there have been times when I have wanted to walk away. I think the church continually the church meaning people of God have encouraged me to stay and um yeah, and continuing to show up like tonight. I've got the flu, so I've been having my cough drops and my tea. But but I wanted to be here to show up and stay. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, so much for sharing this. If this is you with the flu, I can't even imagine how you are like when you are
Well,
full. So thank you so much. This was amazing. Um, we're wow. So we're close to the time, but now we want to open for some questions from all the people that are from all the participants. 174 right now. So, Rihanna, now it's your turn to lead the questions from our participants.
Yeah, of course. So the question that I had, thank you, Michelle, by the way, for an incredible story about showing up. I felt like that was something that really resonated with my question, because my question had to do with like how do you navigate living within systems that contradict the dignity they claim to uphold, and what does it require of us to resist becoming complicit to them, especially with what's going on with Iran and all of the, all the things that America's doing recently. So that is my question.
Are you welcoming anybody to answer?
Oh, yeah, anyone can answer. This is everyone can answer. Yeah.
Well, I would just like to lift up. So here at Stateside, I'm also work with incredible women on land rematriation. So and land justice. So talking about systems that don't uphold the dignity they claim to, like the Catholic Church itself. Espoused what is now called the doctrine of discovery, but these papal bulls that then became enshrined into United States law that basically said European Christians had the inherent right to take all the land in what on this continent, which many Native nations know as Turtle Island, and that doctrine of discovery has wreaked like 500 years of destruction and havoc on not only and on people, genocide and native boarding schools and like loss of language, lots of family connections, loss of land. Um, but also, it has led to all sorts of ecological harm because of this separation of people from land, and then it made land a property and a thing that could just be like taken and used. And I just want to lift up even women that I see on this call. I saw Sister Joan Gallagher. I can't use the chat, unfortunately, but who are part of this movement, who are Catholic women religious, who are part of a movement saying, we need to turn this ship around. Like, we are the church. And in order to, the Pope, was it 2 or 3 years ago, said, we no longer espouse the doctrine of discovery and that, it doesn't reflect who we are. So it was like in words, it got repudiated, but that doesn't undo the damage that's been wrought for 500 years. So there are so many women, and I know there's men too, but today's Women's Day, so I'm going to lift up the Catholic women, especially the women's sisters, who are saying, we're going to undo some of that harm. And like the Sisters of Brentwood who are on this call are partnering with women of the Shinnecock Nation in order to return land and clean up the water and restore life to the water. There's FSPA sisters on here, Franciscan Sisters of La Crosse, who just returned land to Lac du Flambeau, Ojibwe Nation in northern Wisconsin just last October as part of reparations for the church's history, and in particular boarding schools that they participated in. So I just think, as we could, as like Michelle said, we could leave as women in the church. Sometimes these what we learn about our own church and these systems are so horrifying, and that we want to leave, and we would, I think, have a right to, or we could stay and say that we need to be part of the repair that happens. So thanks to some of the women I see on the call.
Thank you. That was such a wonderful answer. I really appreciate that. Does anyone else have a question? Wait.
Brenna, is there any way, can there be any kind of direct connection between everybody participating in this today and how to firm up our own solidarity with the people, the Palestinians in Gaza? Is there a way you can give us some connection? To hear that suffering, just to go through those checkpoints, it's just so ghastly, and you want to do something. Give us a connection of some kind where we can be in solidarity with you, with your group, because we know you personally, we've met you, and you could be a connector for us.
Yeah, definitely reach out to me. But the International Solidarity Movement is they're like they're led by Palestinians. They're
Yeah,
in the
well,
line of
just give
fire.
us that connection to them.
Great.
Okay, can you do that?
Yes, like I can put that website in the chat right now. Oh no, I can't do that, but I can send it to. I don't think
If
I can use.
somebody knows how to do that, we can get
Okay,
that done.
great. International Solidarity Movement.
Okay, is it called International Solidarity Movement?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Incredible stuff.
Yeah.
We got a question asked by Alexa. Well, it's not a question, but it's for Sister Helen. I'm a member of Pax Christi's Young Adult Caucus, and my peace pair, Sister Peggy, is a religious sister from Sioux Falls, SD. We are both dedicated to death penalty activism, and we're currently reading your book. Thank you for being an inspiration. I'm visiting her next month. We'll go to prison to pray for the only man in South Dakota on death row on Good Friday. So that was just the comment, I guess.
Is that Alexa who sent
Yeah,
that?
it's Alexa. Yeah.
Yeah, Alexa. Good. I'll be
Yay,
seeing you soon.
Alexa. Alexa's part of Pax Christi Young Adult Caucus and
Yay.
Peacekeepers.
Okay, wonderful.
Brian asks, have you ever felt like giving up on social justice cause? What helped you stay in the course?
Who's that to?
I'm sorry.
Is that directed to everyone?
Yeah, I think it's just directed to, and he didn't mention,
Okay.
yeah, just anyone.
This is Claire. Let's see if I can get back on here. Am I on mute?
No, you're on
No,
mute. We can hear
we
you,
see
Claire.
you
Okay.
and we can hear you.
So
So
we probably could each answer that, but I moved to lift up a woman on this Zoom, um, Jessica Sun, who has so much enthusiasm and encouragement for fellow Catholics. She started Catholics for Free Palestine, I believe that's how it's called. Anyway, Jessica, if you want to put your name and um, what you're doing in the chat there, it's just kind of extra encouragement in case anyone felt discouraged and felt like there wasn't hope for any Catholics. Sorry. It just Jessica, where are you? Um anyway, I hope that was appropriate.
Oh, thank you, Claire. Yes, John Holden from
Catholic
DC
caucus.
just put the Catholic Caucus of Christians for a Free Palestine in the chat. Yeah,
Okay,
excellent. Jessica's also part of the Pax Christi Young Adult Caucus at Peace Fairs.
that's great.
I think we have time for one more question, Rihanna. The one from Alan that I don't know if I can read it. It is for Sister Helen. So he teaches a college film class at the University of New York and showed Dead Man Walking. And many of their students say they are against the death penalty, except when, and they're different, they mention different cases.
Yeah,
What would you say to these young people?
there you go. That's called a designer death penalty. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights said that in Article 3, simply by being a person, that we have an inalienable right to life, and we can never turn over to governments the right to take life because they're going to set up a system. Oh, yeah, we're going to have the death penalty for people who, and then they're going to fill in that blank, and we can never give them that power. So the person who's saying, I wanted the death penalty, but for this designer, just this for this right here, when you throw that net out and give that government that kind of power to decide that people can be killed for their crimes, you lose the control of it. And then that net is pulled up almost always poor people, overwhelmingly people who have killed white people, uh, as who gets pulled up in the net.
Thank you. Thank you, sister. Um, well, we are on time to finish our webinar. So first of all, thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom and your experiences. It was um, full of hope. I think that this felt like a conversation full of hope, and also remembering what Michelle said about the woman who stayed. It's so encouraging to see all these women that are members of our church fighting for peace, for many different causes, and encouraging each other. I want to thank again the Dorothy Day Guild and the Dorothy Day Center at Manhattan University for hosting this webinar. I want to remember all of you that this will be available on our YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and look for Dorothy Day Guild, you will be able to see this webinar and many others from the past that are very interesting too. So I really invite you to check our YouTube channel. I also want to remind you how important it is for us that you become members of the Dorothy Day Guild. It is completely free of charge, and it is a huge support for her canonization cause, mainly because it shows how many people in the church and how the grassroots are seeing in Dorothy an example of holy life, an example of how we live our faith. And if you become members, you will get monthly missives from the Dorothy Day Guild. We will share with you events about Dorothy, but also about different things that were linked to her, like pacifism, hospitality, etc. You will know when we organize new events that you may be interested in, also reviews of podcasts, movies, series, books that might be interesting for you. I want to let you know that we are also offering this missive in Spanish. So if you have any Spanish-speaking friends that do not know about Dorothy, they can also subscribe and they will receive monthly the missive in Spanish. And also our website is available in Spanish, so we can spread the word about Dorothy. So thank you. Thank you so much for being here today. I would like to finish our webinar with a prayer for the canonization of Dorothy Day. I will paste the link in the chat, so if you want to pray with us, I'll give you like 2 or 3 seconds to open the link. Okay, and now I will assume that all of you have the link open, all of the ones you can, and the other ones just accompany us in this prayer. Merciful God, you called your servant Dorothy Day to show us the face of Jesus in the poor and forsaken. By constant practice of the works of mercy, she embraced poverty and witnessed steadfastly to justice and peace. Count her among your saints and lead us all to become friends of the poor ones of the earth and to recognize you in them. We ask this through your Son, Jesus Christ, bringer of good news to the poor. Amen.
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 So again, thank you so much. I don't know if anybody has some final words, reminding you again to become members of the Dorothy Day Guild and be part of our future events. Thank you to all of our panelists. And I don't know if anybody has any other words. If not,
Well,
we're
maybe
closing.
I spoke to Robert Ellsberg, who's kind of like a channeler of Dorothy Day. He's studied her, he's published her works. And he said she was a pioneer because she was a laywoman. She wasn't a laywoman, and she just moved so radically that she knew she had to be for peace, even during the Second World War, and just cut new ground. And then it's the houses of hospitality in the communities are training centers for people to awaken to the gospel. So anyway, Robert, I talked to him and I told him I was going to be part of this. And of course, I'm going to have to join the guild. I got to join the guild to be part of this because she means so much to me, and all of you, every one of you, and what you shared really lit little sparks inside of me tonight. Thank you.